We are so glad to have all of you here for storytelling today. The Vietnam Women's Memorial and our partners, Eastern National, do storytelling every Veterans and Memorial Day. So we're so glad you're here today, and we'll be back in May. And know that it'll be hopefully as beautiful, and we'll be here. We are so blessed to have this next person who's joined us. John Black first came into our midst, so many years ago. A lieutenant colonel. John would serve not one, but 2 times in Vietnam. And in some ways, he would not only capture his story in thoughts and words, but he would also find a way to use music to tell that story. And particularly to tell the story of the 8 names of women that are on the wall. So it's my honor to introduce from Seattle, John Black.
Well, thank you, Marcia. In their monumental work, we got sound out there? Can you hear me? Okay. In their monumental work, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, Hal Moore and Joe Galloway wrote, "We were children of the 50s and John F. Kennedy's young stalwarts of the early 60s. He told the world that Americans would pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship in the defense of freedom. We were the down payment on that costly contract, but the man who signed it was not there when we fulfilled his promise. John F. Kennedy waited for us on a hill in Arlington National Cemetery, and in time we came by the thousands to fill those slopes with our white marble markers and to ask on the murmur of the wind if that was truly the future he had envisioned for us." And then you read that again and again and think of men, soldiers marching off to war, heading for some distant land to fight an enemy we didn't really understand. And then you think again about the women and what they did, the women who went to war. We had a civil war in our land where thousands of women were forced to fend for themselves when the men went off to war. Catherine Prescott Wormley knew. She was a U.S. Sanitary Commission volunteer serving on a Union transport ship in June 1862, moving wounded from the Peninsula battles to hospitals. This is what she said. "We went on board in such a scene as we entered and lived for 2 days, I trust, never to see again. Men in every condition of horror, shattered and shrieking, were being brought in on stretchers borne by contrabands who dumped them anywhere. Men shattered in the thigh and even cases of amputation were shoveled into top berths without thought or mercy." Catherine Wormley knew, and so did Laura Frost in World War I. Near the battered medieval town of Ypres, she wrote, "Our casualties were 20 and 30% gassed. It caused huge blisters on the men, and they suffered painfully. We became fond of our patients, a young fellow with a bullet hole right in the middle of his forehead. We kept trying to get him to talk. All he could say was glass, but he wasn't paralyzed. When he wanted something, we would keep asking him until we hit the right thing and he would nod his head." But then it didn't end with Catherine and Laura. In World War II, women were in every branch of the service. They did everything except engage in combat. They were clerks, mechanics, administrators, radio operators, photo interpreters, cooks, meteorologists, supply sergeants, test pilots, transport pilots, nurses, and much more. General Eisenhower said, "We couldn't have won the war without them." But they knew about war, and they had their personal hell. Cruel and vicious jokes were told about them, but not by the wounded about the nurses. And then Korea, and then Vietnam, and some still don't understand at all. The women in the war, stories told and then forgotten. And before we came to Vietnam, the angel of Dien Bien Phu knew that war was hell. Genevieve de la Garde Taraba, a French flight nurse, brought a piece of heaven to that hell, much like her female counterparts would do in Vietnam. At Dien Bien Phu, Surrounded and doomed, she helped horrible wounded men, men with amputations, often double, even triple, men with gaping abdominal wounds, men with their brains showing through rents in their skulls, blinded men, men crying out for their mothers, men with holes where their private parts had been. Yes, this was Genevieve in Vietnam. And so the stories goes. Some say it was a nice little war, a war in a land of tigers and elephants. We stumbled on a war some wanted forgotten before it started. And there he was, Lewis B. Puller Jr., who wrote Fortunate Son, a Marine who killed himself in 1977, a casualty of Vietnam. He wrote about the Angels of Mercy, the women of Vietnam, after he was seriously wounded while a Marine on a tour of duty in Vietnam in 1968. He said, "I had lost massive portions of both buttocks. My scrotum had been split. My right hand was missing a thumb and a little finger. My left hand had only a thumb and half a forefinger. I had lost my right leg at the torso and only a 6-inch stump remained of my left thigh. But the dedicated professionals in Da Nang and Yokosuka saved me. They worked tirelessly every day in a world of blood and gore that would have broken men and women of lesser stature. There were also Red Cross volunteers," he said, "who spent hours at my side as I began through a narcotic underworld to assimilate the magnitude of my personal loss." So we thank our women of war, of the Vietnam War. I remember Edie McCoy Meeks, a nurse in Vietnam who was quoted in a story celebrating the dedication in 1993. She said, "I don't have to recover from killing somebody. I have to recover because I couldn't save anyone." Then there was Lieutenant Colonel Edith Knox, a 42-year-old native of Kilgore, Texas, was the chief nurse at the 67th Evacuation Hospital in Quy Nhon, South Vietnam. She wanted to run the first time battlefield casualties were brought in. She said, "The first time I was there, maybe a couple of days when I made my first rounds and walked into the receiving and emergency rooms just after they had brought in 4 young men, all with amputated legs. And I just took one look at it, and I thought, I'm not sure I can handle this. And I left the room immediately," she said, "and went outside, and then I thought to myself, no, I'm the chief nurse, and those nurses that are working in there have to handle this every day, and I have to learn to handle it." So then I walked back in, but it's just, I think, that I had never seen anything quite like that. And she said the first time then it really hit me, and I'm sure it did every nurse that was over there. So we come together today and remember the 265,000 women who served in the military during the war, 11,000 in Vietnam. Of those, 90% were nurses. Others served as doctors, air traffic controllers, intelligence officers, and clerks. Nearly all volunteered for Vietnam service. We honor women who served in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, as well as volunteers for the Red Cross and other international relief agencies, as well as the professions they represent. And I think of my dear friend, Diane Carlson Evans, who inspired me to write the song Women on the Wall. This song is from my album Vietnam Farewell and is dedicated to the 8 women whose names are inscribed on the memorial right here. Diane went through her own personal hell. Nothing in her training prepared her for the level of burns, wounds, and suffering she saw in 1968 and 1969 at Vung Tau and Pleiku. Back home in the 1970s, she hid out in her room at first. She gave up nursing. She was haunted by memories and nightmares, whirring helicopters, blaring sirens, screams and groans, gaping bloody wounds, limbless torsos, eyeless sockets, napalm and white phosphorus burns, punji stick infections, pit viper snake bites, torture marks, all the sounds and stench of death. But Diane had a vision, this memorial. Thanks to Diane's commitment, passion, and true grit, we are now celebrating the 23rd anniversary of the Vietnam Women's Memorial. Sometimes I think of my medevac ride home after my second tour was almost over. I think about the nurses who cared for me as I went to Saigon on a medevac ship, to Manila, to Guam, to Hawaii, to Travis, and finally to McChord Army Hospital. I think of their tenderness, compassion, and unselfish love as our flying hospital ship took off from Tan Son Nhut, loaded with stretchers full of the sick and wounded, bound for Glory Land. It was our freedom bird, our passage home. When I visit our family homestead in eastern Washington State and walk the hills of my childhood, I listen as the wind blows and the summer sets, ending another day. It's quiet. My heart swells and tears come to my eyes, and I listen closely. I hear the sound of the voices calling to me from my past, the voices of my fellow soldiers in Vietnam, gunned down in their youth. But then I pause and think again, and I think about the women on the wall who aren't coming home, and the women after them, some of whom entered a personal hell. Then I hear the lyrics of my song echoing, repeating almost silently in my mind over and over again. On this earth, at another time, you gave your life to save mine. In that war so far away, you cared for me in a special way. I heard your voice as you spoke to me. You gave up what you could be. You nursed me through the lonely nights as the rockets came till dawn's early light. Oh, farewell. Oh, farewell. Women on the wall, your spirit is strong. Women on the wall, the boys say so long. Women on the wall, God bless you all. We'll always remember the women on the wall. At Saigon, Chu Lai, and Pleiku, tenderness was all we knew. You gave us strength, kept hope alive. You gave your love so we'd survive. Oh, farewell. Oh, farewell. Women on the wall, your spirit is strong. Women on the wall, the boys say so long. Women on the wall, God bless you all. We'll always remember the women on the wall. Carolyn, Elizabeth, you're living on. Eleanor and Hedwig, not really gone. Pamela and Sharon, history will tell. Annie and Mary, we'll remember you well. Oh, farewell. Oh, farewell. Women on the wall, your spirit is strong. Women on the wall, the boys say so long. Women on the wall, God bless you all. We'll always remember the women on the wall. Live on in our hearts, the women on the wall. We'll always remember the women on the wall. Thank you.